Hello, beautiful, and welcome to Mom's Talk Sex podcast. I'm so excited to be here with you today because I have the beautiful Lisa here. Hey, Lisa.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad that you're here. I'm excited for this conversation because Lisa's really going to bring you a different perspective on some sexy new topics and new fun things that maybe you haven't heard about yet. So, Lisa, why don't you introduce yourself
Okay.
and let us know a little bit about you and what you do in the world?
Well, I'm almost 60 years old. I am a grandma, mom, dealt with all kinds of things for infertility. We have three adopted children who are now adults, and they have children, so I've got four grandbabies. We're an interracial family. We have dealt with poverty, addiction, and I homeschooled for 25 years.
Wow.
So, I'm, that jack of all trades kind of person. I'm kind of that mess of all trades kind of person. We live in the heart of Kansas, right smack dab in the middle of the country. And podcasting is kind of a new thing for me. I started podcasting the first of the year, so this first of last year. So this is like my anniversary coming up in February.
Ooh.
In February, so I'm excited about that. I hit that 1 year mark, and it's one of those. I'm really excited that I stuck with it, but I'm kind of surprised that I stuck with it because I am such a hot mess all the time. So I was working in the medical field for a long, long time, doing home health and working in nursing homes. And I love that part of my life and being a caregiver. But about 3 years ago, I felt like God was telling me to go home. And I wasn't exactly sure why, because, it's not like I don't like to work. I have the personality of too muchness, is what we call that. So I do like to socialize. I'm kind of an out, and you'll pick up on that before we're done. I had 10 years in radio and loved every moment in front of the microphone. And so I didn't really understand, but I really felt this press to come home. And so I did. So I quit my job and I came home and I started praying a lot about why I was here. And I felt this incredible urge to start writing. Now, the important part about that is that people understand. I hate writing. I'm like I'm like not a writer. I'm not a writer. I don't even like writing down the order when we go get pizza. I'm just not a writer. And so, but I came home and I was open to the idea because I knew that I had some stories to tell, and I figured this would be a way to kind of start that process. Took 6 weeks in a writing course and sat in front of the computer, and it was just a big blank screen, and I had no idea where to start. But I began to pray about it, and sure enough, the message that came to me was, well, where has God redeemed you and given you the most peace? Where have you seen that? And it was in my ability to forgive my abusers and my father who had abandoned me when I was really small. So I felt like that was the message. And man, I just started writing. So two Bible studies have been born from that. Discarded, which is a daughter's journey to reclaim freedom and forgive the father who left her behind, and the Christian Victim's Guide to Forgiving the Unforgivable. And so those have been done, and now I'm kind of trying to. I mean, I started with a memoir, and all of a sudden there was just all of these answers in Scripture, and so it just became a Bible study. So, and now I walk other women through the process of going from a bondage and bitterness to finding peace through forgiveness. Interestingly enough, and when I saw your invitation about being on this podcast, this is not part of the subject that I've talked much about. So, and yet, there has been a huge metamorphosis in my life because of the ability to find value and worth in who I am and my intimacy, my relationship with my spouse. So there's just, this is very fascinating to me that is really connected. What I've done before and what I've been through before really is connected to this, and nobody's talking about it. So I love the fact that we're talking about it.
Yes, me too, because I feel like you're the epiphany of the woman that I actually work with. And, you know, that connection, we just don't make that connection. So why do you think that is? Why do you think that is that women don't connect the two?
Well, first of all, I think there are a lot of us that don't want to talk about it. I mean, most of us that have gone through any kind of sexual abuse as a child or even as an adult, there's a shame attached to that. And even when we had absolutely no control whatsoever regarding what happened to us, we still carry guilt for that. And so we're not going to talk about that because it really makes us feel bad. The other thing that I notice, especially from a Christian perspective and in the church, many of our perpetrators are deacons. Many of our
Yeah.
not I'm not saying there's a lot, but I am saying that they're not comfortable talking about their sin either. And so it's not going to come up in church. It's not going to come up in small groups very often. Men are usually really sensitive about the subject because they have a tendency to feel like we're trying to group all the bad guys in, you know. And what they don't seem to understand is a lot of the abuse that many of us have suffered that may not have come from men. You know, it's not like we're picking on men, but we 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 don't talk about it in circles where we need to be authentically talking about it and finding some healing. And when you connect that with a taboo subject like sex, it's not going to be, we're not going to find healing soon enough. We're not going to find a place where we're comfortable and understanding that, man, God's in it. He knows, he knows you're having sex. You guys know that, right? Everybody knows. God knows you're having sex. So don't be surprised. It's not like it's not like you're going to scare him off because, he's not going to gasp in horror and he already knows. So I think that we need to talk about the connection between the self-worth and the kind of the self-deprecating opinions we have of ourselves and what God really wants for us in sex. So it's just that a lot of people don't make the connection because one is so painful and taboo, and the other one is just taboo. And so
Right.
we don't spend a lot of line. And it takes a little bit of I talk about everything. So
Yeah.
if people go to my podcast, they'll find out I just talk about everything. I don't hold anything back. I have been I used to. I mean, and that I talk about that. You kind of become that shrinking violet person when you've been abused. You don't want to
Yeah.
be the center of attention. You're kind of afraid everybody will see the scarlet letter on your forehead. So, but now, I think part of the fact that I've been able to walk in freedom from all of that pain, I feel like God just called me to really talk about it. I mean, and not be intimidated by something that's hard. I think that that's the way we grow and we find peace. So,
So were you one of the women that was like aware of her abuse and kind of healed it and went to therapy and talked about it? Or was it something that was dug deep inside and was it affecting your marriage? How did
s-
you deal with this?
well, I was abused when I was very young. I was about 4 years old. And it wasn't frequently, but it was the son of a babysitter that my mom used from time to time. And so, and she was just a very trusting soul, and I don't blame my mom for any of that. And I know there are a lot of people that, they've had stepfathers and uncles and boyfriends that have stepped into the home and taken advantage and hurt them. Mine was not that way. My mom was just very innocent. She didn't think that people thought that way. And so
Yeah.
when the 17-year-old starts taking advantage of the 4-year-old, it was just shocking for her. I knew I was abused. I didn't understand the impact on my self-worth until I was probably in my early 20s and it was affecting my marriage. And I realized I don't want him touching me. I don't want to I went from being totally promiscuous as a teenager and looking for love in all the wrong places because of my abandonment, my need to prove I was worth something, to
Mhm.
having someone who wanted to nurture and care and securely take care of me and protect me and love me unconditionally and all of that. And I didn't want to have anything to do with that.
Yeah.
And so it's a fascinating dichotomy for me to think that in one day I was the promiscuous 19-year-old, and the next day I'm the married wife who doesn't want to have sex at all. And it was all attached to shame and self-worth. And so I knew I had been abused. I didn't understand. And then after I got married, I began to have nightmares that were replaying my abuse. And which is fascinating to me because I didn't have nightmares until after I'd gotten married. And I think that was just God's way of saying, you got to deal with this. It's
Yeah.
coming up because you got to deal with it.
Yes.
So I knew, did not understand the impact, certainly didn't understand the impact of my shame and pain separating me not only from my husband and from that relationship, but it was keeping me separated from God because I was really mad at him, you know, for what happened to me. And that's what I deal with in my Bible studies, searching for forgiveness is you got to deal with that. that anger and that hurt and that pain. Otherwise, you're just a slave to it. So,
That is so true. That is so true. And it's so interesting when you say that, because when I'm listening to you speaking, it makes total sense that when you're so disconnected from your body, the sex is just a filler. But then when you have somebody that actually loves you and wants to give to you, you're like, no, that is so foreign. That just shows how much we're disconnected from the body and from our
absolutely.
power,
Yep.
right? Because I'm like, okay,
Absolutely.
well, I can't accept real love, right? I can
Yep.
accept the touch, the use, but not real love.
Right.
And
Because
you're
I'm not
right.
worthy. It's so funny.
Yeah.
I used all of those one night stands, and there were a lot of them. I used all of those one night stands to prove I didn't need to have an intimacy in
Right.
sex. And then when I had the intimacy in relationship, sex was attached to that, and I didn't want to have anything to do with that because intimate sex didn't make sense to me. The only sex I had ever known was abuse or the promiscuity that I was living through when I was a teenager. So, I think you're right. And when you finally can make the connection and you realize that genuine sex is an intimate act, you know,
Yeah.
and I go even deeper than that. I think that the enemy, and of course, everything I speak about is from a Christian perspective. So for those who are not believers, just hang on, just bear with me, right? So I believe that because scripture references the church as the bride of Christ and Christ being the groom, right? That our physical intimacy of bride and groom and that genuine, authentic intimacy is a little bit of an earthly picture of the kind of closeness that God wants to have with us, an intimacy with us. Okay, and I'm not talking about that as sexual, I'm talking about as an intimacy, right? So anytime there's a problem between spouses and intimacy, that's a reflection of the lack of intimacy that we have with God. And so the
Mm.
enemy knows when he's getting you all stirred up about that. He knows what he's doing because anytime we are broken in our intimacy as a couple, then we can't emulate the kind of intimacy that God wants us to share with the world as his bride. So it is, it's kind of a deep concept and you kind of got to think it through a little bit. But when you struggle to be intimate in your sex life, especially with those that you are you are intimately attached to. I mean, my husband and I've been married for almost 40
Oh my
years. Isn't
gosh.
that
That's
crazy?
crazy. Yeah.
Because I am only 29.
Of course.
How did that happen? So, so when you have and he's my best friend and he was my best friend from the moment I met him. In fact, I didn't even know his name when I felt the Lord telling me that's who I was going to marry. And so I followed him around like a puppy, which was funny because he was following somebody else around. So that's another book and another podcast. So,
Yeah.
but when you finally get that intimacy that feels so good, that somebody knows you. I mean, they know your likes, your dislikes, the things that you don't like to admit about yourself and and your personality. They know that and they love you anyway. That should breed a real, genuine closeness in your sex life.
Yeah.
But when you're carrying the shame and burden of the pain you suffered through sex, not through an intimate, genuine, quality relationship, but through sex, if you carry that into that intimate relationship with your spouse, of course it's going to impact your sex life. And it's going to, I just felt trashy. For me, it was just dirty. I mean, I was just dirty.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, I didn't share that with him. He didn't understand why, when we were just dating, I was all about it. And when we got married, I didn't want to have nothing to do with it. So I think that it's not one of those things that most of us can sit down and, theoretically and logically put pieces together and go, oh, okay, now that makes sense. It's too emotional. And
Yeah.
that's the step by step part that we have to go through, that understanding that regardless of what happened to us, we really were loved. We just didn't feel loved. And we were really
Yeah.
wanted. We just didn't feel wanted. And we have to walk through that place.
It's so interesting you say that, because with what I do with women, it's really about the energy of the trauma that's left in the body. you know?
Mm,
And so a lot of times talking about it with a therapist or bringing it up, it doesn't really clear that stuff from your body because emotionally it's so attached, but you're so disconnected that you don't even know how to go there,
mhm, mhm.
right? And so it's really kind of bypassing that disconnect and those beliefs about what it is and clearing it from a place of, okay, this is not me. It's not my part. I don't want this anymore. And I want to step into my power again,
And a
you
lot of that
know?
has to do with giving permission to something that you would never, I tell a lot, when I talk to people about bitterness in my studies, when we're bitter toward those who have hurt us or injured us, and we don't forgive them, they don't even know that.
No,
They don't know that you're not forgiving them. And to be quite honest, they probably don't care.
right.
And what we've done is we've handed our heart right over to someone we would never give our heart to. And so I think you're right that we don't realize we have surrendered who we're meant to be to the thing that actually shouldn't have permission to hold us, right?
Yep. There's this thing that I do with my clients where we kind of, because what happens a lot of times when you get abused is a part of you stays with the abuser, like energetically. It's
Mhm.
almost like what you're saying, right? They take away a part of you. And so then your body doesn't feel safe again to be there, right? And so it's really about clearing that and bringing your power back from that person that you don't even know is still holding that. And that's why a lot alive, I believe it's because there's a part of you that's there with them still living that
Mhm.
every
Mhm.
time energetically and cognitively. And so bringing that back to you and returning the power to you is really how you end up healing and clearing and moving on when you can
Right.
have that forgiveness. So I love what you're saying. And so do you think that this also affected your ability to have children?
Well, that's really interesting because my infertility was never diagnosed with a cause. I don't. My hormones were normal. Everything seemed to be working. Didn't always work regularly, but it seemed to be working.
Yeah.
No physician was able to say, "Well, here's the problem," and so it wasn't until we just said, "Okay, we're just going to assume we're not having babies this way. We're gonna do it differently," and we adopted 3 children. But and um, interestingly enough, the book that I've written about abandonment, the Bible study I've written about abandonment, so applies to these adopted children and their opinions of abandonment. And I didn't even realize that we had that in common until I started writing. And one of my kids said to me, we all feel this way, right? This is how the adopted mental state is. We know you love us and we know that you adopted and we love you too. You're our parents. But there's always that abandonment thing. Why would you not want me? And we think that
Yeah.
all the time. Um, and so again, there's power that we've just handed over to an
Yeah.
attitude, right? And so I don't know. I can't give you a real good answer about whether or not it impacted my ability to conceive. I wouldn't be surprised, only because so much of our self worth and the thought lives that we have does connect with our physical being, and we don't even. I just thought God didn't want me to have kids. Like it was a punishment for being such a whore. That's really, honestly, I spent many years going, well,
Wow.
he's not going to give me kids because I was such a whore, right? And
It's so crazy how those belief
yeah,
systems really create a reality. I
yeah,
talk about that about like your belief systems create your reality.
sure, sure. You walk right into it.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
do,
yeah, we walk right
especially as
into it.
women.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other part of that too is when you suffer an injury or trauma and you don't ever have an opportunity to deal with it, it's like an open wound all the
Yeah.
time. Doesn't scar over, it never stops bleeding, and it never stops hurting. So you have to find a freedom and a desire to address it. And sometimes we don't get there until we're such a mess. It's just like addiction. Until we hit a rock bottom place where, man, I can't stop thinking of myself like this. I can't stop thinking I'm a whore. I can't stop thinking I'm dirty. I can't stop thinking I deserved what I got. I mean, those horrible lies that we think about ourselves. you're right. They make us powerless. We're a victim the whole, all of your life. So 40 years I spent trying to figure out why God would let such a thing happen to me and blaming him and hating my dad and all of those things. We're developing the personality and we're developing the character that I didn't really want to have. I didn't want to be a person that thought so little of myself. It was, and for us to not want to address it because it's so painful, it's just another form of bondage, right? We
Right.
can't get free if we don't do the hard work of walking through it.
So what was your wake up call to actually heal?
I'm glad you asked. I was sitting in church one day on a Father's Day, and one of the huge problems I had with my father's abandonment of me when I was little was that he was not there to protect me when I was being
Mm,
abused. And so I'm in the middle of a Father's Day sermon, and I got to tell you, when you're infertile and you're waiting to get pregnant, every parental Sunday sermon, you just roll your eyes and hope people aren't looking at you because you're not happy. You're just not happy.
yeah.
Um, and I talk about the fact that, I remember being in church and being one of three other families that was trying to get pregnant. And one of them would finally say they were pregnant, and everybody would turn and look at the infertile lady. What's she going to do? How's she going to respond?
Oh,
And you got to put a happy face on and be really, happy for that. And it was kind of the same for me when it came to Father's Day sermons in church. Everybody knew, because I'd made it clear I had been abandoned. I mean, my relationships with other people were close enough that I could say to them, sometimes I'm really mad because my father didn't want to have anything to do with me. Um, and so I'm sitting in this sermon, and this verse I've never seen before pops out and says that God is the father to the fatherless. And I realized that
mm,
it was actually a way of keeping me safer by not allowing me to be raised by a father that didn't want me. Be,
yes.
you know? So, once I processed that, it allowed me to start walking through the steps. Then I realized that it was impacting my relationship with God, and I needed to deal with that. Why it was I was still angry with him. I still needed to know where he was and what was going on and why it was allowed, right? And those are all deep things. But he does address all of that. He does um, make sense of that. And once I realized that my value was tied to what God created in me and his salvation for me, then I could stop thinking of myself as that dirty little trashy girl that was abused, you know,
Mm,
because it's about truth. It's about
yeah.
understanding the truth about who you really, really are. So
Right. I love what you said because that just resonates so deeply, and I feel like so many times when we are abandoned, we always look at us as what's wrong with us. Even when we're abused, when we're abandoned, when something that's going on, like what's wrong with me? What's not good with me? Instead of has nothing to do with me,
that's right. That's
right? Has
absolutely
nothing to
right.
do with me. It's their story, it's their path,
Yeah,
it's their decisions, and I have nothing to do with it.
right.
So I
You
love
are.
that you say that.
And it took me a really long time, even clear up to the place where, my father got older, and of course I was the oldest daughter. So when he got really sick and was on his deathbed, who did they call? Well, I didn't even have a relationship with the guy, right? Even though I had tried, I spent years trying to, I was like 25, 26, and had walked through the process of understanding that God was really providing a better way for me to be raised by not having him in my father in my life.
Yeah.
I made the effort, to try and create some sort of relationship with him. So when he was on his deathbed, even after walking through all of the stuff that I had with God and understanding my value and self-worth, I was I still didn't understand why he didn't want me. And it finally took somebody else to say to me, it was just one of my friends in a prayer circle. She said, "You realize how awesome we think you are, right? So you
Oh.
realize that we all think he's an idiot and he really missed out because we think you're awesome." And it took me a little bit to understand that um, not trying to be prideful or anything, but God's created something in me that's in me, that's only in me,
Yes.
right? And so um, that means there's great value in that. And he is the one that missed out because, I hate to say I'm pretty awesome, you know?
Yeah.
And all of us have that, people call it a spark or they call it a whatever. You can call it whatever you want to. But you were created for a purpose, and even the pain you've suffered is something God wants to use in your life, and probably more than that, because Second Corinthians tells us He's the God of all comfort, and He gives us that comfort so we can comfort others.
Yeah.
He's got a purpose for all of that. So, you know, do the hard work that it takes to forgive others and forgive yourself, and walk in the value that you really have as His child, so that you can hit that purpose, right?
Yes.
So yeah, so that was my aha moment, was in church with that one verse. You have been fathered. You just didn't realize it, that you had been
Yeah.
fathered.
I love that so much. So how does it affect your sex life now that you've been through this transformation? Have you noticed difference?
Are you just trying to make me blush? Okay.
I am.
I think I think my husband and I are kind of weird in that we've been married 40 years, and we don't um, how do I word this so it just doesn't, I want to be delicate, but I don't, but I also want to be very honest. Um, we have as active a sex life now as we did when we were in our 20s and I
I love
was healing. We still love each other. We still like to snuggle and kiss. We embarrass our children on purpose. Like,
that.
we make out on the couch during the Super Bowl. We don't care. And so, and there was those years when I was kind of struggling with that self-worth stuff, and it was impacting our sex life. He was so patient with me because he understood, you know, that dysfunction. He knew that something had gone on and he couldn't fix it, but he knew God could. And he just gave me that space to work through it and to talk about it. We would talk about it. I would tell him. And there were times, and there's still some things that bubble up, and I will admit to you, there are still times that I'm standing at the sink doing dishes, and he's doing that, thing that men do when you're standing at the sink doing dishes, like, put everything down and come pay attention to me, please, right?
Yeah.
And there's still a part of me that goes, "Oh, you don't really want me." In my head, I still have that
Yeah.
conversation. "Oh, you don't really want me. I'm not, you just want to, yeah, you just want to have sex, but you don't really want me." Right? And so that though, and I still battle that thought life because the enemy knows, man, the moment you let that in, the intimacy that you're supposed to have is gone.
It's gone.
It's gone. And
Yeah.
so I still sit there, no, yeah, get that. I do that, get thee behind me, Satan thing, and realize that the truth of the matter is he does want me because he loves me. He
Yeah.
loves me. He worships the ground I walk on. And I'm a fat chick, man. I'm not some 20-year-old hot thing that, I used to sing in a rock band. And so every once in a while I'll break out pictures of me in my black leather jumper and all of that stuff. And then I'll tease him and say, well, this is why you fell in love with me, right? This is what, and so, the intimacy part has nothing to do with the physical part. It just makes the physical part right and
Yeah.
better. And so I still battle the whole thought life thing of, whether or not you're really worth loving and embracing and giving pleasure to. Are you really worth it? You have that, so I still battle it. Um, I just keep saying the truth. Yeah, you do deserve it. Yeah, that's why God gave him to you. Yeah, you guys can do it, anywhere in the house. It's your house. It's your relationship. And so, but it's not like that. It ever. It's not. I don't. I want people to understand. Um, and somebody wrote a book one time, The Battlefield of the Mind. I think it was Joyce Meyer. She wrote a book about the battlefield of the mind. Your thought life is something that you can control.
Yes.
So when those negative thoughts come in, you have to be prepared with the positive truths that battle them. See, you
Yeah.
take those thoughts captive and say, that's not true. That's just a big fat lie. That's not true. And the truth is, dot, dot, dot. This is what the
Right.
truth is. So I think that's when we talk about the truth setting us free, because that's one of those very powerful messages in Scripture. You shall know the truth. If you continue in my word, you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Well, then you got to know the word, because that's where the truth is.
Right.
Hide that in your heart so that you can battle when those negative thoughts come. And they still come. Like I said, I've been doing this for walking through this bitterness thing for a long time, and they still come. But the
Yeah.
truth is powerful. It's the only weapon. If you look at the shield of faith and the helmet of truth and all of that, if you look at those um, soldiers' attire that's in the scriptures, there's only one that's an offensive weapon, and that's the sword of truth, which is the word of God.
Yeah.
That's your way to fight back. And so that's the one. I mean, that's what I tell people. Put that word in there so you've got the truth to battle the lies, because the lies are ingrained. I mean, I've been thinking of myself as a trashy little 4-year-old my whole life. That's almost 60 years.
Yeah. That's crazy. Wow. So if our listeners want to find more about you and your podcast and your books, where can they do that?
Well, I'll humbly tell you where you can find me. So, so I do have a podcast. It's called The Chronicles of the Christian Drama Queen, and it's available on almost all of the podcasting platforms. So iTunes or Spotify or iHeartMusic or any of those. But I also have two Bible studies that are available on Amazon. And I would just tell people you can type in discarded Bible study or Forgiving the Unforgivable Bible study. Both of those should bring up my books. But I'll tell you, if you just shoot me an email at lisa@christiandramaqueen.com, I can work with you on paying for those, but I will spiral bind them for you so that they lay flat and they're easier to work. I mean, as an old homeschool mom, I love anything you can spiral bind.
Yeah.
So so I offer that for free if people want to buy the books from me. I'll just do that because that's the way I like them and that's the way I want to send them out. You can find me on YouTube, Christian Drama Queen. You can find some free resources where I actually walk people through what I call the Christian Drama Queen assessment, and it just asks questions about things that we might need to work through because of your victimization. And a lot of women that I talk to, and you've probably run into this too, I don't really have a problem, right?
Yeah.
Will say, I don't have that problem. It doesn't bother me that I was molested every day for 6 years. It doesn't bother me, you know? And they say that because we've been taught that we're just supposed to, you know,
Yeah.
pull up those
Brush it.
boots, pull up them bootstraps and just move right on. And so I send out this assessment that kind of makes you think about things like, are you the kind of person that thinks you have to have a resolution in the middle of an argument with your kids? Are
Yeah.
you the kind of person that has to be right? Um, be, or here's a big one. Are you the kind of person that feels like if you don't perform properly, you're not going to be loved by your husband and your kids and the other people in your life? You've got to always say yes. You've got to enable their bad behavior against you or bad boundaries with you. So some of that stuff can be attached to your victimization. And so I send out this free assessment and a little video that walks you through it. And then that also puts you on my mailing list. So you can contact me through my mailing list. And so just go to freedom.christiandramaqueen.com and
Perfect. I love
and
that.
get a hold of me that way. I'm always trying to think. Oh, I also have an undated planner on Amazon that you can use in conjunction with the studies. And so you can actually put the scriptures, or you can start whenever. So even in the middle of the year, if you wanted to, and the scriptures that are associated with the study are there for memory work. And so you can use it as a planner and all of the stuff that I love about planners. Do you love planners? I love
I love
planners.
them.
Oh my gosh, I'm a fanatic for planners. Um, and so, oh yeah, work planner, food planner, kitchen planner, kid planner, homeschool planner. Yeah, I'm a nut. And so, but I made this one so people could use it in conjunction with the study, and it would keep that memory work in front of them for the whole month, right? So, so that's available on Amazon as well, and it's just called the Discarded Planner. So,
I love it. So thank you so much for this amazing conversation. I really enjoyed every moment of it.
oh, good. Thank you for having me. It's a topic I told you when we started, I'm not really sure how this connects, but you know what? It really does connect, right? So thank you for sharing that and for having me to have the discussion. I love that.
Thank you guys for listening and tuning in, and I hope you join us again next week. Have a beautiful rest of your day.